Hey, it's your friend Choice CJ here, and I'm excited to be bringing you guys my draft analysis for Season 3 of the UBL. Yes, I'm so excited that this league is back. UBL Season 2 was a blast, and not just because it was a particularly successful season for me. If you guys did miss my run through last season, we were able to make playoffs and then fight our way through Deebs, TTM Sticks, and the Uzi Gunner to earn ourselves the Season 2 championship. Big shout outs to everybody who I played, and big shout outs to everyone who was involved in making that season happen. We're back better than ever in Season 3, with some returning faces and a bunch of new coaches as well, and a bunch of close friends. Josh Ultra Player got invited, which is definitely exciting. Garchomp the God is a good pal who's invited. There's plenty of other people who were out of the season that I'm excited to get to know. Like Dr. Slacking, for example, and the Choice Specs. Vepsis is someone who I've known for a very, very long time who was added. So yeah, just lots of good feels all around. Sohan got added. Goldoa, Dragon, and Deathly are the last of the coaches who were added. So really nice additions to the league this season. But let me stop fawning all over the competition here and focus on probably what you guys came here for, which was a breakdown of the squad that we drafted. I hope you had a chance to catch the stream, or at least some of it. It did take place on Irish Emerald's stream, so yeah, I do hope that you enjoyed that. If you did miss it, I'll be showing you the team, and of course, you didn't get this in the draft stream, but I'll be giving a breakdown of my thought process throughout the whole thing, while hopefully being relatively brief. I have a tendency to make these things excessively long. Before we go into the mons, let me just talk a little bit about the format of the draft. So 16 teams, which is a pretty average sized draft, not too big, not too small. I had the 11th overall pick, so I have been pretty lucky recently to have pretty good draft picks. I think the worst that I had in the last year and a half was UBL Season 2, where I had, I think, like 9 or 10. I was able to grab the Mega Lopunny in round 1. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to get something, like I was thinking I probably wouldn't be able to get something amazing, but we're going to see what drops. In terms of like the drafting style, it was sort of a hybrid between tiers and points. So basically they took tiers 1 through 5, and then converted those tiers to the equivalent point value for like the free pool, right? So if you're familiar with tier-based drafts, like you can draft your tier 1, tier 2, 2 tier 3s, a tier 4, tier 5, and a mega, and then you have 4 remaining picks, and you get a budget of 400 points, and you can draft Pokemon from different tiers, and if you're drafting it for that free pool, they have a certain point amount allotted. So like tier 1 is a extra 180 points, tier 2 is 120, tier 3 is 100, tier 4 is 60, and tier 5 is 40. So what they did is they got rid of tiers altogether, and they said, all right, here's like the 180 point pool, the 120 point pool, etc. And they did interpolate a little bit. So some of the mons that are in tier 1 but are kind of on the lower end of tier 1 in terms of value got reduced to like 160 or 140 points. For the Pokemon that are in tier 3 that are like slightly less valuable than normal, they would be 100 points, now they're 80 points. So it's basically like a point style draft, but instead of like using the sort of normal point values that a lot of the points draft use, it's based off of the tier structure. So I'm sure that that's really confusing if you're not like a big draft league like viewer and player. Like if you don't live and breathe this stuff, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, it's nice because it's close enough to the traditional structure that I'm comfortable with, that I don't have much hesitation about building the team. But it gives you like some built-in flexibility where you can customize the draft a little bit more. You're not forced to pick something from a tier, even if it doesn't fit perfectly with your team. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the structure. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, you still have to draft a Mega, and you still have to fulfill your 1,000 point requirement. That is the budget. It's 1,000 points. So now that that's out of the way, let's actually go into our first round draft pick and proceed from there. So I was very lucky to see Pokemon drop to number 11 that I consider to be one of the top 5 Pokemon in Draft League. So for me, like the top 5, not necessarily in this order, are Tapu Koko, Celesteela, Lando T, Zygarde, and then the last one is the Pokemon that I ended up drafting, and that is Mew. So we're going to be putting Mystique, that's the nickname for my Mew, putting Mystique back on my team. I haven't used it in like 2 or 3 years since one of the previous UBC seasons. It's so funny how my opinion on this Pokemon has changed over time. I remember like my very first draft league, I said that Mew was a very overrated Pokemon. That couldn't be further from the truth. Mew is amazing because like it just has a really great bulky stat distribution, so it's very hard for a lot of Pokemon to kill it. And it has just so many setup options that it applies a lot of pressure, whether it's like Calm Mind, Bulk Up variants, Swords Dance, Nasty Plot, Rock Polish. The fat sets of Mew are so good, though. Like, Taunt Roost Mew is, like, off the charts in terms of how good it is. It's just impossible to kill this thing most of the time if you're Taunt Roost. It has great, like, utility in terms of rocks and defog and things like that. Just, like, the perfect Pokemon on the team. I want to be careful not to fall into too many pitfalls with Mew. Like, so for me, especially, like, Mew is, like, a bulky psychic type. I usually like to use bulky psychic types to deal with fighting. So things like Medicham, Gallade, and Lopunny, I would tend to make Mew my response to that, but I don't want Mew to be forced to do that. So I'm going to do my best to draft around it in such a way that I'm not so pressured by fighting types. One of the ways I go about doing that manifests in my second pick. So my buddy Josh, Ultra Player, had been using a fairly similar team in his APA run. He had 3 drafts, because that's the way APA worked this most recent season. You had a draft for games 1 through 4, a second draft for games 5 through 8, and a third draft for games 9 through 12. His 5 through 8 games featured a core with Mew and this next Pokemon. And that Pokemon is Cat Hillard, aka Mega Aerodactyl. Cat Hillard is kind of a weird nickname, but it's the name of the pink Pokemon Ranger. From back in the 1990s, and like I don't think that Cat necessarily had like a pterodactyl as her like Zord of choice, but I know that the Power Ranger that preceded her, Kimberly, definitely did, and so it was close enough of an association for me that I wanted to name this thing Cat Hillard. But anyway, I digress. So I really like Mega Arrow as a partner for Mew because it's able to outspeed all of those fighting types that I mentioned and revenge kill them with Aerial Ace. There's some exceptions, like bulk up variants of Gallade and Medicham can be scary. Like Arrow's not going to be able to revenge kill that. And it is true that Medicham gets Bullet Punch to hit Mega Aerodactyl relatively hard. But the nice thing about Mega Aerodactyl is because it has such a blistering speed tier of 150, I very rarely need to invest a lot of speed into it in order to outspeed things. So that leaves a lot of spare EVs to invest into bulk. So Mega Aerodactyl ends up being pretty bulky in most matchups. And so it can probably take a Bullet Punch relatively well from a Mega Medicham, depending upon its investment and in terms of how many boosts it might have. Arrow is just such a good mon for applying like team building pressure. So like with a Pokemon like Arrow, you're gonna be very often expecting Choice Scarfs on your opponent's team because they're gonna want a way to potentially outspeed and revenge kill Mega Aerodactyl. It has great coverage. So, like, just for any Pokemon that might like to try and check Aerodactyl, Aerodactyl has a pretty good way to beat it. Like, it has Ice Fang and Aqua Tail for things like Gliscor, Orlando T. It's got Earthquake for Steel types. For things like Metagross and Jirachi, you could hit them either with Earthquake or Crunch. It has Hone Claws. It's a pretty nice setup option, which is cool. It has great support options with like Defog, Taunt Roost, things like that. I'm just like excited to have Mega Aerodactyl on my team because anytime I have to play against a Mega Aerodactyl in a draft league battle, I hate it. Like, it's so hard to prep for, and I'm tired of having to go up against it. So now I am going to be inflicting that pain upon my opponents, and that's going to be a satisfying feeling. So I like this to go with Mew. It's not a defensive partner for Mew, but I think it relieves some of the pressure versus those fighting types in a different way. So now I'm looking at like the typing that Aerodactyl has, and obviously it's weak to a bunch of different types. It's weak to Steel, Electric, Ice, Rock, and Water. I think that those are the 5 that it's weak to. It might be weak to more. But so I realized there's a bunch of Pokemon that synergize pretty well with Aerodactyl in terms of being able to cover those options, particularly like the priority that those types get. So like Aqua Jet, Bullet Punch, Ice Shard all hit Aerodactyl super effectively. So I want to be careful of Pokemon that have super effective stab versus me. So the next Pokemon covers pretty much all of that. And that is Ferrothorn, which I'm appropriately nicknaming Hug Me. Ferrothorn is not a Pokemon I've ever used before in Draft League. I know that some people don't like it, and I am weary of using Ferrothorn because it does have a 4x weakness to fire, and it doesn't have very good attacking stats, so it can be passive if you're not careful. But like the things that Ferrothorn does, it just does so well. In terms of being able to stack hazards, like that's something that is definitely appreciated by Aerodactyl. It has lots of annoying status options with like Toxic, Thunder Wave, Leech Seed, stuff like that. It has decent enough offensive coverage. It even has some cheeky setup options, which is funny, like Swords Dance Curse and things like that. Yeah, and it's really the typing that I'm after for here. So all those typings that I mentioned, Aerodactyl hates, like Ferrothorn doesn't mind whatsoever. Can deal with all of those. So I really like this to support Aerodactyl. I have a plan to take Ferrothorn with like Seismitoad in a later round, because Seismitoad, with its ability Water Absorb, has the exact same immunities that Ferrothorn has in terms of covering Aerodactyl. So it's immune to electric, immune to water. It resists bullet punch, and it's got a reasonable resistance to Ice Shard. I mean, it doesn't literally resist, but it does pretty good. I guess Ferrothorn doesn't technically resist Ice Shard either, but I digress. I forgot the other one that I said. It resists rock. Ferrothorn and Seismitoad both resist rock. So, and the fact that Swampert has that 4x weakness to grass, and it resists fire, which is the 4x super effective for Ferrothorn, they are very good for one another. They create a little bit of a hidden power choke. Or at least that's what I'm hoping. It doesn't work for Pokemon like Thundurus that can run both HP Fire and Grass Knot. But at least I'm forcing them to run that coverage, and that means that if they have T-Bolt, Grass Knot, Hidden Power, Fire, that they can't run like Double Dance versus me. So I appreciate that mix of typings to make team building more restrictive on electric types. So next, after that, I decided that I really wanted Sylveon. So Sylveon was a good option for passing wishes into both Ferrothorn and Seismitoad. So what does Sylveon hate? It mainly hates Steel types and Poison types. Ferrothorn and Seismitoad both resist those typings, and they don't have amazing recovery on their own. So like Ferrothorn does have Leech Seed, but it's not the best recovery move. But because like Sylveon does lure in those types, I can like fairly easily pass wishes into Ferrothorn and Seismitoad. Unfortunately, Sylveon got taken, so I had to settle for a returning member from last season's championship squad, and that is Wayne the Togekiss. Wayne being one of the members of Wayne's World. Those guys are clowns, Wayne and Garth, and so Togekiss, having the Super Luck ability, is a little bit of a clown and a jokester, prankster herself. Wayne, it sort of fulfills that role in terms of being able to pass pretty big wishes if I need. Togekiss has the advantage of having like extra utility compared to Sylveon. Like Sylveon and Togekiss both get Baton Pass, which is nice for gaining momentum. But Togekiss gets Roost, whereas Sylveon does not. Togekiss gets Defog, it gets Nasty Plot, it still gets Heal Bell, it gets Screens, so lots of great support options. The only thing that kind of stinks with Togekiss, it's also faster than Sylveon, which is really nice, but the only thing that stinks about Togekiss on this particular team is that it does share a lot of weaknesses with Aerodactyl. So like the Electric, Rock, Ice weakness, Steel weakness, all of those things are shared between those two Pokemon. So that's why I was aiming for Sylveon over Togekiss, but I'm still pretty happy with Togekiss just because it's a great mon on its own, has some extra tricks that Sylveon doesn't have, and it's just one of my favorite Pokemon in general. I think this is the third or fourth time I've drafted it, so no complaints from me there. So my next pick is trying to address some key weaknesses that I have. So I'm definitely Ice weak up to this point. I don't have any resistances on my team. I don't have like a really amazing fire resist because Aerodactyl doesn't really count. I'm not going to be using it as a pivot for fire types. I want another rocker. Like, I already have 3 rockers, which is awesome, plus 1 spiker. But like, my Mew and my Aerodactyl don't really want to run rocks. I want a Pokemon that can run Heal Bell so that Togekiss is not pressured to do that. And so kind of all those things together led me to take this next Pokemon, which is Cow, my Milk Tank. Cow is a reference to Cow and Chicken. The reason that's relevant is that I am drafting a chicken Pokemon later in the draft that is nicknamed Ant Chicken. So I have Cow and I have Ant Chicken. So anyway, Miltank is awesome because it has a bunch of really great abilities that makes it very versatile. So like Thick Fat and Sap Sipper give it a bunch of really great resistances and immunities that most normal types don't have. Like, normal doesn't have a ton of defensive value normally, except being like a ghost immunity, but Miltank has the advantage of having those defensive utilities. And then Scrappy is really nice, like if I want to run like mono normal type sets. That's mostly going to come into play on like curse sets that Miltank could potentially run. Like, Miltank with Curse is a pretty good win condition in the right matchup, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, like, I wanted another nice defensive Pokemon to go with the defensive core that I'm building here, and I think Miltank is really nice. It's a little weird that I took it round 5, but like, this draft overall has been really weird. Like, a lot of defensive stuff was going really early, and so I kind of felt pressured, and I was encouraged by my front office to make a reach here for Miltank, when I think I should have maybe gone for something else. But like, yeah, Miltank, just the way that things were going, I don't think it was going to be around at that point. So like, one of the things that went earlier in this round as an example is Seismitoad. So Seismitoad went early round 5, and so like, I was pretty surprised by that. So like, that's just an example of kind of the way that this draft was evolving to be kind of weird. So Miltank was the choice. So next, I'm going to go back into Josh's draft pool for inspiration, and I'm going to add a Pokemon that was on his team to my team, and that is none other than Ball the Gengar. So Ball is the god of murder in the Forgotten Realms. It sort of felt appropriate to give my Ghost-type Pokemon a name like that. But Gengar is really awesome because it does have a really good opportunity to kind of do what Aerodactyl does in terms of revenge killing some of those dangerous fighting types, like Medicham and Gallade. Like, Gallade a little bit to a lesser extent, because it does have Shadow Sneak, which Gengar doesn't appreciate. But it can kind of serve a little bit of that function if I want it to. And Gengar is just a really awesome wall breaker on its own. Like, so I don't have anything with an attack or special attack stat greater so far than what Gengar has with its base 130 special attack. Like, Ghost is just such a good offensive typing. It applies so much pressure. Like, opponents are forced to bring dark types or normal types. But of course, Gengar does get Focus Blast, and I did choose to designate Gengar as one of my Z move users. So you had 200 points of budget to spend on Z-Mons. And so Gengar, being only 120 points, was a pretty good option, because then I can make a couple of low-tier Pokemon Z users as well. So yeah, I just really like the option to have Z Focus Blast on Gengar in particular. But then I can use it even for like Z Shadow Ball, which should nuke basically anything that doesn't resist. And Gengar just is cool in terms of its utility options as well. Like Will-O-Wisp, Knockoff, Taunt, stuff like that. It's really nice. I have tons of Taunt on this team so far, which is really, really nice. Like, I have Mew, Arrow, and Gengar now. And I don't have Taunt on like Togekiss, but Togekiss does have Encore, which is a really nice support option. So really excited to have Gengar on the team. You know, I guess the other thing worth mentioning too, it's a Grounded Poison. Excuse me, I just tossed my USB thumb drive across my desk. It is a Grounded Poison, so Toxic Spikes can be absorbed by Gengar, which is really nice. So that's the first half of the team. Like I mentioned, I was hoping to get Seismitoad, like to pair with my Ferrothorn, but Seismitoad got taken in round 5. And so I had to settle for, I guess, what was the next best thing. There were some other things I was considering, like Gastrodon, but Gastrodon also got taken here. Like, this is kind of what I mean. This draft was weird a little bit in terms of when things were taken. Like, Gastrodon usually goes later if it gets drafted at all. The only other like potential Water Absorb mon I could have gotten was Quagsire, but Quagsire doesn't really want to run Water Absorb, but rather run Unaware. So I had to kind of abandon the idea of having Water Absorb on my Water Ground type, and the only one that was left that I thought was good was Swampert. So Swampert, aka before Roids, which I feel like is appropriate given how its Mega Evolution looks, is going to be a really nice partner for Ferrothorn. This exact core of Ferrothorn plus Swampert has been recommended to me by folks like Styx from TTM and lots of other folks, just because they do cover each other nicely defensively. And again, I really like it as a partner to Mega Arrow to cover some of the annoying typings that Arrow doesn't like, and I think it's a very good Wish recipient from Togekiss if I choose to run Wish on Togekiss. So that's really nice. The nice thing about Swampert over some of the other water types that I mentioned is that it's not quite as passive. Like, you don't typically see offensive sets of Swampert, but like base 110 attack is nice. Like, it's really nice. It makes it a lot harder to wall. And you can run like offensive sets of Swampert. It's not unheard of. I've even seen some crazy sets like Choice Scarf Swampert to spam EQ and stuff like that. So that's definitely not a bad option. It has Curse, which is pretty cool. So like Curse Waterfall could be nice if your opponent doesn't have like a very good way to hit it with his super effective grass type move, like a stab grass type move. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, but this thing, it's got nice bulk, nice offense. It's got Stealth Rock. It's kind of all I needed for. It's got just the right coverage moves so that it's hard for certain things to wall it. So excited to have Swampert back on the team. This is a Pokemon that I most recently used in GBA D League last summer, so happy to add it back to the team. So at this point, how many points do I have left? I have 240 points left. So I've used 75% of my potential draft pool yet so far. So I'm going to be digging into the low tiers for the next couple of picks. I mentioned before, like, there's still a bunch of key resistances that I'm lacking. I'm starting to patch up the fire weakness a little bit. Now that I have like Swampert and Miltank and things like that, but fire is still scary in general. Water, I don't do that well versus. Electric, I'm still feeling pretty good versus. But you know, you can never really have enough electric answers just because they apply so much momentum pressure with Volt Switch. I still want more rockers. Like I have like 5 rockers now. But 2 of them don't really want to run rocks, and then the third one I might rather run spikes than Stealth Rock. So getting another Stealth Rocker would be really nice. I guess this is sort of a roundabout way of saying that I drafted Druddigon for my team. So Druddigon is another returning member from last season. I named it Kanye because Druddigon is a motherfucking monster. So this gives me a lot of really key resistances to water, fire, electric, grass, things like that. Gives me a pretty powerful dragon type attacker. Like 120 attack, you can't really sleep on that, especially when you combine it with like the sheer force ability, and you can throw off like really powerful fire punches and iron heads and stuff like that to hit like steel types and fairy types that might like to switch into Druddigon. Rough Skin is really nice for pairing with Rocky Helmet, so I have 2 Rough Skin Rocky Helmet users, which is really nice. It's another really good way to wear down fighting types. Because most of the best fighting types are physical attackers. There's not too many special fighting types besides like Keldeo that I can think of off the top of my head. So yeah, Druddigon, I think it's going to be a really good Pokemon to use this season. And it was only 60 points, so it leaves me with 180 points to use in this draft. It also has Taunt, which is nice. This is another Taunt user. I have so much Taunt on this draft, I love it. You're going to start calling me TTM Jolt after not too much longer, because TTM Jolt to me is like the king of taunt users. He and I played in March Madness this past spring, and he literally brought quadruple taunt versus my team. So I'm not joking when I said he's the king of taunt. Next up, I don't have a dark type yet. And one of my biggest fears in general in Draft League is dealing with bulky psychics, so things like Necrozma, Reuniclus, Cresselia. So I always want to have a powerful dark type to deal with them. And especially on this draft, like I do not have a bug type to hit psychic super effectively. I do have Gengar, but Gengar is not going to be that great versus like Calm Mind variants of psychic types. So I really wanted like a good dark type. And then I also want Ice Shard on the team, because that's another one of my kind of general team building requirements. I want Ice Shard to help deal with Salamence, Dragonite, Lando, Zygarde, things like that. And so there's only 2 Pokemon that have Dark Ice as a typing. One of them is Weavile, which I do not have enough points for, and the second is Sneasel, aka my Gil Thunder. Gil Thunder is the sort of apprentice to Meliodas in Seven Deadly Sins. And Meliodas is like the demon, he's from the demon race. So kind of makes sense, with Sneasel and Weavile being dark types. To name, like, Weavile, when I drafted, it's named Meliodas, and Sneasel is Gil Thunder. But yeah, Sneasel, this is probably the #1 most drafted Pokemon in my draft league history. Sneasel and Quillfish are like my top 2 for drafts. But Sneasel is just so good with the speed tier that it has, being 115. It's able to outspeed a lot of things and apply a lot of pressure with its stabs. Base 95 attack is not a ton. But like, again, it's just the fact that its stab moves are so hard to switch into makes it really powerful despite its lackluster stats. You can boost its stats with something like Swords Dance if you really want. Normally you're just gonna run like a Life Orb for attack set, but so you don't need the Swords Dance. You just go with the Life Orb. But Swords Dance is an option. I like this thing for obviously utility of knockoff, utility of pursuit. It also gets a really nice tech move that some people know about, but it gets punishment, which is a really great way to punish those setup dark types, setup psychic types, which is really nice. It's another fast taunt user. So yeah, Sneasel just hits all the check marks for me. It's one of my favorite mons. Even though it's not that powerful, it is still a scary physical wall breaker. And so there's 2 typings that I'm missing here that I think are really, I guess there's three typings that I'm missing here that I think are really key for drafts, and that is fighting, fire, and electric. So I'm going to use my last 2 picks to cover those typings. I am finally going to get to the pick that I alluded to earlier, which is And Chicken, my Blaziken. Blaziken, being a kind of chicken-looking Pokemon, is actually a really scary wall breaker. It has really good mixed attacking stats, especially its attack base 120 is really nice. 110 special attack is something to sneeze at. Its speed is not too bad. 80 is not amazing, but you give it a choice scarf, it's actually pretty scary. I like Blaziken over other fighting or fire types like Emboar because it does have Baton Pass. So like I said, I can make it a choice set, and I can abuse momentum with Baton Pass as my opponent switches around to deal with this thing, because Blaziken is definitely a Pokemon that forces switches. Like, there's not many Pokemon that resist the dual typings of Blaziken. It's just basically like Latias, Azumarill, Primarina, and things like that. There's just very few Pokemon that can handle this. Like, I guess Poison Waters as well, like Quillfish, Tentacruel, Toxapex, stuff like that. Blaziken gets some cool setup options with like Agility and Swords Dance, which is really nice. What I like for Blaziken on my team is that because I made Gengar my Z user and not something like Mew, I'm able to make Blaziken my secondary Z user. And so, try switching in on a Blaziken that has up a Swords Dance and is going for Fight Z High Jump Kick. It's just not going to happen. Blaziken is just that good. Yeah, I think this is pretty nice. It even has some cheeky utility options with like Will-O-Wisp and Defog. So it's not just a one-trick pony. There's some pretty good options for Blaziken. Even though it doesn't have speed boost, I think it's going to be a very powerful member of the team. I think I'm getting a lot of value out of the 60-point Pokemon right here. So last but not least, I do have 40 points remaining. I do want an electric type. Luckily, there are pretty good electric types littered across the low tiers. I just decided to go for one that I haven't used before, and that is Electivire, which I'm nicknaming Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill is a comics character from Thor. He's like sort of a rival to Thor in the sense that he also can wield Mjolnir. And so I thought like Electivire being kind of bulky and also being an electric type, Beta Ray Bill was a pretty appropriate name for Electivire. So Electivire is also a pretty good physical wall breaker. Like 123 base attack is pretty good. And it gets a really nice move pool for dealing with potential checks to this thing. So like Earthquake, Fire Punch, Ice Punch. It gets Brick Break, all sorts of things. Like, obviously I could like rattle off the list of moves that it gets. It gets Taunt, another Taunt user. We have literally 6 Taunt users on the team. So hopefully I can prevent too much like stall or setup shenanigans from occurring versus my team if I choose to run lots of Taunt. And unfortunately it doesn't get U-turn, which is like usually a requirement that I have for electric types that are on my team. But like being a 40-point Mon, like you kind of take what you can get. What I do like about Electivire is it does get Motor Drive, so it gives me an electric immunity besides Swampert. So yeah, between this thing, Swampert, Ferrothorn, and Druddigon, I think electric type's gonna have a little bit of a hard time breaking through my team. I guess like Thunderbolt with like a Fight Z Focus Blast on like Thundurus can still kind of break through most of my mons. Not that I'm trying to give away secrets to my opponents who have Thundurus. But yeah, like just in general, I think like I can predict what my opponents are going to bring on their electric types, which is always a really nice option. I wish I could have made this a Z user. I actually have 20 spare points in my Z budget that are not going to be used, but it didn't work out. But yeah, I think this is really nice. The other thing, just the last thing to mention about Electivire is that with base 95 speed, this feels a really critical speed tier. With the way that I like to draft, I just find that I very rarely draft anything between base 100 and base 80, which means that Pokemon such as Kyurem Black are pretty scary because they can run Adamant Nature versus me. But Electivire speed ties with Kyurem Black, and so if they don't want to run Jolly or Timid on something like that, you're going to run the risk that my Electivire outspeeds and can throw off a powerful hit versus it. So really like that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my entire team. That's the whole 11 Mons. Overall, I'm really satisfied with this team. There was a bunch of things, like I mentioned, that I was hoping to get, like Sylveon and Seismitoad, that it didn't end up working out. But otherwise, like I think the team has really great synergy. The speed tier distribution is really good. The gap between Sneasel and Arrow is a little unfortunate. But otherwise, like I don't think that I'm gonna be able to. I think I'm gonna be able to deter most Adamant and Honest Natures. I have lots of utility, lots of rockers, lots of taunt. I don't think Mew is too pressured to deal with fighting types. Like I could have done a better job. I could have gotten like a bulkier Ghost type or a better flying type to deal with the fighting types. Like Zapdos comes to mind. But Togekiss I think could do reasonably well versus the fighting types. And then I have plenty of ways to revenge it with Gengar and Arrow, and then I have two like Rough Skin Rocky Helmet users basically to further pressure them. So it's really nice. I'm excited to use it. It's like still slightly bulkier than what I'm used to. I've got like the Ferrothorn, Miltank that are kind of on the more passive side. Swampert kind of fits in that category too, in Druddigon, but like they all have offensive options that I'm hoping to exploit throughout the season. And yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. It's kind of an awkward way to segue out of the video, but I just do want to say that if you enjoyed this video and you're excited for the next round of UBL action, make sure you drop a like and leave a sub so you can stay up to date on my weekly UBL content and all my other latest and greatest gaming Pokemon videos that I have coming out each week. I do have MPL playoffs going on. We're going to have our week 1 battle versus Root going up. I can tell you which day because I have a schedule. It's going to be going up on the 15th, so that is this Saturday. So make sure you check that out. And yeah, for my week 1 of UBL, which should be going up this Friday, that's going to be going up against Deathly. Deathly I Am, one of the biggest names in UBL, recently added. Very prominent Twitch streamer, does lots of Pokemon streaming, shiny hunting, things like that. Also has some first-person shooter pedigree. I think he played some Call of Duty back in the day. So looking forward to making a name for myself versus the biggest coach in the league in week 1. Definitely going to give it my all. So thank you all for watching. Until the next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.